Welcome to the Femsplainers special Thanksgiving episode. I'm Danielle Crittenden.
I'm Christina Hoff-Summers.
And we have such a good show before we take a week's break. So it means you'll be hearing this on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And then next week, we won't have a show because we're going to take 1 week off. If that's okay with everybody. We're with Ella in the studio, Ella Ryder.
Present.
So, Christina, as we approach this Thanksgiving, it's a nation divided. We can't even agree on the same facts.
You can't even agree on the same turkey. This year, my family, they asked me if I minded. I don't. It's fine. But Cajun turkey, what is that?
I don't know. I was going to bring up the real partisan divide, which is deep fried or roasted.
Well, do you have a strong view?
Well, some say, those partisans for roasted say, what about the stuffing? And those who deep fry it say, but the skin is crispier and it's more tender. And we actually, 1 year in our household, did a turkey
not a
test kitchen.
What are those?
Turducken? No.
God.
No, we deep fried one. We had 2 turkeys. We deep fried one and we roasted the other. And then we did a blind, I'm not bringing up the blind audition test.
Okay.
No,
For our Patreon members, I have more information.
No, stop it. We're not. You want to lose? We can't lose our patrons. Anyway, we did a blind taste test on the turkey, and the definitely the deep fried one won. And it takes 35, 40 minutes to do. And you put in.
I'd like to see the methodology behind that taste test. I want to know the biases of the people who participated. So there's a lot there, and we'll send it to
maybe
Snopes.
5 people. So Ella, we asked our listeners for some of their turkey tales. We put this out on social. If you follow us on Twitter or Facebook, you could have participated.
Well, give them the Twitter account number.
At Femsplainers and Facebook at Femsplainers. We need you to follow us, and you can be up on these things and participate. So What did they come up with? What was our question? What is the most awkward conversation?
Yes, most awkward Thanksgiving conversations, and what are the awkward conversations you're dreading this year?
Okay. So what did they say?
This is my personal favorite, which was "Can't say here, Mom on Twitter." That was pretty good. And then, "Are you only visiting us so that you can watch the Lions on our 72-inch 4K TV?"
Oh, that's a bit of a humble brag too, with a put down. Good one. Okay.
One woman said, "Having to explain why I'm not married yet. Spoiler: I haven't met the right guy." Classic. And the last one is, "Why are we having Thanksgiving? We're Australian."
It's a good question. I wonder about the Frum household.
Well, we are Canadian.
And that's why you do weird stuff like ducks instead of turkeys.
Oh, well,
I mean,
that was a mistake. Well, because actually the benefit by, being Canadian is that our American Thanksgiving, we don't have to travel, except I make our kids come and stay with us who live in California.
You don't have to give thanks because you're not thankful.
Like, what are we thankful for? Canada.
If it weren't for Benedict Arnold, I can see a Canadian hero.
Thankful for beer, and no, he's not a Canadian hero.
I'm wondering.
No, but it just means that we don't have these massive family get-togethers that we have to worry about and all the angst that comes with them. But so as we got, my husband David got so excited about, this taste test and that his deep fried turkey won because
the so-called taste test.
And he and also it gets to be something he gets to do because it's, as he points out, when men cook, they like it to be dangerous and usually involving fire and knives. Well, this involves, as those who do
and
a deep fryer with hot oil
that could explode. I'm afraid deep fryers will explode. Are these steamers? Have you ever used a steamer?
No, the deep
They could
fryer.
explode. Don't use them.
The deep fryer only explodes, and it will explode. I mean, it will blow your house up if you put the turkey in while it's still frozen or partially frozen.
Well, who would do that?
Well, you'd be surprised. There's firemen go out every year to people who do this. But anyway, he got so, just tantalized by the fact that you could do this whole Thanksgiving turkey in literally 35, 40 minutes. I think it's like 5 minutes a pound or something. I don't know. But anyway, so on New Year's, he decided he wanted to do duck and do like a beautiful, crispy Peking duck. So we had a bunch of people.
Did he have a recipe? Have others tried this?
No.
Oh,
he
God.
was winging it, as it were.
That must have been.
So this seems like a great idea, right? Peking duck in 10 minutes.
No.
And I can't remember if you were there, you were away. This is a few years ago. And he put it in, and, you sort of budget to eat a little bit later on New Year's so you're not all falling asleep like as we would in our household by midnight. And what he didn't account for, science might have told him, is that because the duck is already fatty, the fat keeps cooling down the oil, with the result that it took something like 4 hours.
How cold was this turkey?
Oh,
this duck.
It wasn't. It's just a scientific thing because turkey is so dry. It's not a fatty bird. That
Right.
the skin just instantly gets really beautifully crispy, but it remains juicy. But the duck just took hours, and people were at our table, ready to kill themselves. And they.
You had several Thanksgivings.
I know.
because that
Well,
was
this
like
was
when
New
we
Year's.
were
To
there.
be fair, this
remember
was
when
New
we
Year's
were
Eve.
there? You forgot the
David
turkey
forgot the
or
oil. Did we
something?
tell this
I
story?
think we may have told it.
Last year you came over and Fred was alive, but
My kids, we were starving. It was Thanksgiving,
And David's like, okay, the turkey will just take 40 minutes. And he forgot to buy the oil. And then, of course, by that point, every store in the universe is
was it
closed.
the oil or he had no,
the oil.
propane gas?
Oh, it wasn't the oil. It was
the
propane.
propane.
And there's no one who has propane.
He siphoned it off somebody's barbecue in the neighborhood. He almost got arrested.
Thanksgiving Hanukkah miracle. I don't know if you remember, I was so angry at him. It was like the stress, I was like, you had one thing to do.
And I
all
remember
my
I was with my
vegetables were
daughter-in-law,
roasted.
Jen, and we had a plate of cheese and we had wine and we were having fun and not noticing that an
the
hour,
kitchen.
2 hours, we just kept, by the time we came to the table, we didn't care.
Also not noticing I was so ready to kill David because we only discovered at the last possible minute.
How can you be mad at David?
Well, he had one thing. He had one job, Christina. He had one job.
Yeah, but who would think of that? But anyway, moving on.
Moving on. All right. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about is given the awkwardness and terror that you Americans have to face on Thanksgiving, is how to talk. I mean, this is the year with the impeachment, hearings going on.
Are there impeachment hearings?
Yeah, apparently. Somewhere out there.
Actually, I haven't been following them. And I know I'll get in trouble for that somewhere, but I just can't.
Well, this is an impeachment-free zone, this episode.
Right.
And generally, so there was a great, great story in The Atlantic. I'm sorry it's become paywalled, but, it's worth going past the paywall. This story by Andrew Ferguson, who we love. And he wrote a story. The headline is called "Can Marriage Counseling Save America?" And it's not really about marriage counseling. It's really about this group called Better Angels that is started. It started right after the election of Donald Trump and seeks to bring, Republicans and Democrats together, like in local libraries. You sign up, equal numbers of red and blue supporters, and just have them talk and kind of depolarize and learn how to talk, as he points out, not just with people you disagree with. The problem with our polarization is it's led to contempt, and contempt undermines any ability to speak reason. So they're sort of...
It's a dangerous emotion. I mean, when you have contempt for someone, it means you have decided that they have no worth whatsoever. And you just have no value, no quality. It's the most dehumanizing emotion.
Right, and it's about bridging this bubble because, of course, everybody's now in their own media Facebook bubble. So,
echo chamber.
You're in the echo chamber. So this group, Better Angels, it actually works. That by the end of it, all these cliches that Republicans have about liberals, that they're elitist and condescending and all the cliches you can think of.
Yeah. They're sort of true.
And says the liberal. And they want government to support everything.
But I see, and then conservatives are racist, homophobic,
blah blah blah.
Hate government.
And then they come through it,
No.
and then they find that what is weird, it's as you can expect, that they actually all believe in basically the same things that are reasonable, that the government should help the poor.
Whereas, liberals think the government should help the poor. Conservatives don't disagree, but they think overall the way to overcome poverty is to have a dynamic free enterprise economy.
Right, but they all kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah, unless you're dealing with a sociopath.
Right.
People want positive things, and some are more selfish than others, but very few are just, they want the world to be worse. Most people think they're making the world better.
Well, I thought so this is a great way of to take some of these techniques to your Thanksgiving table. Well, one of the things they suggest doing is, and I don't know, maybe you could adapt this, Christina. I know we're going to talk about you have a bigger problem, but for people listening who don't know how they're going to deal with their Republican uncle or hippie Democrat,
or just very beloved and darling but annoying stepson Tamler Summers on Very Bad Wizards.
One of the things, you could set up a whiteboard. And then each person, this is what they do in the groups. Let's try it in a family. You come and you write the people. So the liberals write what they think the Republicans think about them. So they'll write the elitist government, blah blah blah, socialist, whatever. And then the Republicans have to write what they think the liberals think about it. So they kind of own it. It kind of diffuses it rather than it becoming accusations from the other side. And then they talk about it. So maybe your mom could go up and write, I'm a nag, like things people think about her. And then
I wonder if this would have worked with Roxane Gay in my debates in Australia. Like, she could have written, I think Christina is a, what did she call me?
Were you a
racist?
Racist,
white supremacist adjacent hoe. And then
Well, the latter's true. Come on. You're a bit of a hoe.
Yeah, that would have been fair. But then I could have responded, well, I guess I understand that you feel, and then we could have had an I-thou relationship.
Yeah, it didn't happen somehow. But
we'll
try this at home, people. Try it at home.
Well, I'll try.
Report,
you know
what are you going to do?
I'm not doing it.
Okay,
tell
them what.
Every year, it's now a beloved tradition on the Very Bad Wizards.
Air quotes.
Yeah. That Tamler and I, my stepson, philosophy professor, and
it's on his podcast.
It's on his podcast, yeah. And every year we have a post-Thanksgiving sort of family meltdown, all-out brawl on the culture war. And Tamler, as Sam Harris pointed out, Tamler is in denial. No amount of evidence.
You pointed that out on our podcast. You actually raised it.
I raised it, and he said, "Yes, I've seen that. That is a serious problem with Tamler." And I thought he would joke about it.
The actual quote and play it, so you can just
just to
you
prove me
put
right.
it on your phone and just keep playing it at him all dinner.
Oh, I will. No, I have a better idea. So I have a new approach for I'm not following the advice of the better angels. This is the demons of our nature, and that's what I'm going to deploy, because I realize what Tamler does. He doesn't really object to my particular positions on how bad things are for free speech, how bad things are, the undesirability of the cancel culture. What he doesn't like is that he thinks I'm obsessed with it and I'm preoccupied with it. And he's always suspicious of preoccupation. And to be fair, I am too. Not my preoccupations, but there are people on Twitter that are just
other people's preoccupations.
Other people's are very...
They're stupid.
No, they just get boring and predictable. So he doesn't like that. And so I'm not going to come up with my issues. I am just going to bring up a topic that he will explode, which has to do.
Tamler, could you just press
don't
the skip forward button on the mic? Don't listen, Tamler.
Do you remember Deflategate? And Tamler's
the football. Yeah,
football.
because your sons are big football fans.
They're not just that, they're Brady
Sports
fans, they're
Yeah.
Patriots
Yeah.
fans, obsessive. Actually, it's problematic how involved they are with these teams, but never mind that. But I'm just going to bring up Deflategate because some kid just won a science award by saying Brady cheated. Deflategate was real. And then there's this...
What, like a science award, how does that relate to deflate?
Well, it was scientific, the physics of deflation.
Okay. So he proved
He proved it. Okay. Now, Tamler's going to overreact. He's going to get furious, and then I'm going to do to him what he does to me. I'm going to say, Tamler, calm down. You're exaggerating. No. You know, like it doesn't happen. You know, it may be. And I'm going to use all of his approaches. I'm going to.
So it's such a clever idea. It's reverse psychology.
Right.
You're going to set him off for once instead of you being provoked.
And use the patronizing remarks that he makes to me, and I'm going to prove that he has been unfair and irrational.
Well, that's maybe something else our listeners can do at Thanksgiving is use this reverse psychology on your crazy uncles.
And the purpose is not to bring people together. The purpose is to drive each other insane.
I don't know. I think we're getting away from the spirit of Thanksgiving.
We love each other dearly. The reason this Better Angels isn't necessary for my family, we like to argue.
It's your family hobby.
Yeah. We do have, we used to have big fights in the car, family vacation, mental health breakdown alerts. Somebody would finally call, stop, time out. But we have fun.
Well, one of the articles I came across for this week that was relevant as well was, Thanksgiving is a time to get really, if you're married.
Drunk.
Well, another thing that happens is if you are married or with a partner, you get mad at them, right? And you have to deal with their family. And this is always a source of tension, in-laws, or when your husband forgets there isn't propane in the deep fryer at the last minute, and you've had something to drink and you might overreact. Well, I want you to remember this fact. It is from the Washington Post. New research shows for the first time that younger adults are more likely to have to share a home with a partner than a spouse. So living together, basically.
Shacking up.
But it also shows that cohabitation doesn't deliver the same levels of happiness, trust, and well-being that marriage brings. Some 59% of those 18 to 44 have lived with a partner they weren't married to, according to a study of the Pew Research Center. We like Pew. You approve of Pew. Compared with 50% who've walked down the aisle. And that's a reversal from as recently as 2002, when more Americans in that age bracket had experienced marriage. And they say that while living together is on the rise, married Americans enjoy greater overall happiness as well as a greater satisfaction with their relationships. And it extends, they call it the marriage happiness premium.
Or the smug marriage.
For the smug marriage. You have a right to be smug. Extends to nearly every aspect of a couple's relationship with one notable exception, their sex lives.
They have bad sex lives?
No,
married people? I thought married people. Joan Rivers used to have this joke where she'd say, "How many of you are married?" And then she'd say, "And the rest of you are still having sex."
Well, get this. While similar percentages of married and shacking up report being very satisfied with their sex lives, among married people in particular, women report greater levels of satisfaction with their sex lives than men.
In marriage?
Yeah. So maybe it's not as great for men in marriage, because this gap does not exist among cohabiting couples. That's kind of interesting. But married people, one of the reasons they think cohabitors are less satisfied is because they're usually together for financial reasons or economic, that they've moved in together because it makes economic sense, but they're not living together because they've decided, well,
True love.
or this is the person I want to spend my life with. So that's just when you're ready to kill each other this Thanksgiving or rolling your eyes about going to have to eat with the in-laws. I think that's a good thing to remember.
I guess. I'm not persuaded by that. But never mind. Let's move on.
Before we get to our guest, and we do have a really great guest and very relevant to Thanksgiving, is we have, you know how I like to have news for mansplainers, like really helpful.
Oh, God. Am I going to have to plug my ears again? Is this going to be scary? No, don't say it. Oh, no. No, that's too sharp.
That was one of, I think, our best items ever. That's from a bad, toxic marriage. That's where if you wake up...
The Elena Bobbitt Thanksgiving. Imagine that.
With your wife standing over you with
Don't stop.
It's probably... You're not going to have high levels of satisfaction.
Well, they just need to try this Better Angels. Where you...
But
Active listening.
Here's another argument for marriage. Boy, I'm on a smug married roll, aren't I?
Yeah.
It says, okay, this is, of course, from my favorite source, the Daily Mail, but it's about a real study. Divorced men are more likely to have erectile dysfunction because they've had unsatisfactory sex lives or become too used to porn, says a sexual health expert in England. It says they're more likely to have this problem because they've had negligent, absent, or unsatisfactory sex lives, or see the act of passion as more work because they're under stress or pressure at work.
Oh, the poor guys. So this erectile dysfunction issue is not talked about anywhere near as, women talking about PMS or something. And maybe we should have like a national telethon to raise money for erectile dysfunction.
All the donations would be anonymous. I'd like to give $50. Not that it's mine. Not that I have.
A lot of those smug marrieds would be donating, I bet.
The wives. Anyway, that's all I've got. So,
well, we have a lot coming up for our Patreon supporters. Now that we're going to have a new segment for our supporters at the end.
Patreon.com.
Where you can support us, but get special material that's maybe a little too erratic for the podcast.
Or erotic.
No.
Okay, so as people who listen to this podcast, especially those who support us, we do a monthly episode just for our patrons. It's called Last Call. We've usually been a little overserved by the time we've done it. Mm-hmm. And we answer their questions, we do their comments. And
we give love advice.
All kinds of things. But now for patrons who pledge $10 a month or more, we're going to do, and this really came out the other day when I was sitting with you, we're at my house, and you just went on a tear. You just went on a rant about something. And you had me laughing so hard because you were just so,
energized and keyed up.
I thought,
bummed out.
I thought, man, we should let Christina or me, if I have a rant in me, to just do a weekly rant. Things really bug us, but we can't really put in the podcast, or we don't really have time to get to in the podcast. So we're going to do a bonus rant.
And can I say what I'm going to rant about this week? Because I'm already...
Don't give it.
I'm not going to give it away because it's only for our supporters.
Subscribe.
Snopes is considered the premier fact-checking website. I think the BBC referred to it as the go-to Bible for fact-checking. And, that used to be true. In fact, aren't you in Snopes?
Yeah, I do. I'll talk about it on the segment after.
Oh, God. Does that have to do with the vodka tampons?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about that later.
I discussed it in the past.
And I've discussed Snopes. I exposed urban legends, and they were respectful.
You're
and
in Snopes too, but for far more
But now-
reasons.
Yeah. But now it can't be trusted. It's gone.
Okay.
It's been occupied by like
Okay,
delusional
stop,
feminists
stop,
are taking over
stop.
Snopes, and they
Stop.
Okay.
We're saving that rant.
Yeah.
We
So
want to keep
if you are Patreon, you will get the rant, and it's a fact-filled rant.
the ramp to the rant. So that's patreon.com/femsplainers. Every nickel goes to the production of this show. We're still not making ends meet. We just want you to help us out. If you like the show, please help us. And we're now we're working on other bonuses, but we're going to definitely add in the rant
The weekly rant.
and the monthly episode for everybody. And now let's introduce our guest, because what is Thanksgiving known for other than turkey and we're supposed to be gratitude? It is known for
Beauty.
beauty. Beauty.
Savory treats.
Sounds like shopping.
No, okay. Gratitude.
No, we said that. Shopping. Black Friday. It's the biggest shopping.
Said the shopaholic.
Said the shopaholic. Like Friday morning, my daughters and I were all online.
You are?
Yeah.
I need a new TV.
Okay. Oh, well, okay. Get it on Black
But
Friday.
75-inch, that sounds too much.
But no, so Black Friday is, of course, the biggest shopping day. And so our guest, her name is Pauline Brown, and she is the former chairman of LVMH, which is Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton North America, which is like just the premier luxury. It has so many luxury brands under it. She was the North American.
She's the lady of luxury. She's the philosopher of luxury.
Well, right. She's written this book called Aesthetic Intelligence: How to Boost It and Use It in Business and Beyond. And that sounds like what I sort of, when I came in, I thought, oh, maybe this is like a business book and no, she is like, it's like Coco Chanel wrote a book.
Right.
It's all about how she's got her, she's like a prophet on, not with a F, with a PH, on how, if we notice that businesses now need to provide experience,
Ambiance and
Ambiance.
mood and make the customer feel good.
meaningful experiences. And this is what we're seeing on Instagram, and why big box stores, and not so much big box stores, but department stores are failing.
Yeah, because of the lighting. The lighting is horrible in Macy's and
Well, also you can get so much of it just online. So why do you need to go into a store? So retailers are
So if you go into a
having to
store, it
reinvent.
has to be worth it.
right. So
And
there's that.
Like Apple Store is
Right.
pleasant to go in.
But then she takes this idea. So she advises companies, well, how do you do this? How do you get that beautiful branding, that aesthetic experience? But then she talks about how we can all learn basically taste and style, and how we can bring it to ourselves and our own lives. And this is what you said about beauty. So how do we bring that sense of wonderfulness into our lives and into our world? And you don't have to be Louis Vuitton. You can do it on the most basic levels. You don't need tons of cash. But she's like an anthropologist of style and aesthetics, and her book was just amazing. I love this book.
I love this book, and it reminded me. We'll ask her about this, but I remember all the holidays, and my aunts and my grandmothers and all the women would come together and just create these banquets for the family that were so beautiful and so elegant. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but do you think women are more
aesthetically oriented?
Yes.
On some things. And then
Unless you're married to an architect.
Well, and then I think men have other aesthetics. But one of the things she talks
they
about-
appreciate it.
Yeah, and one of the things she talks about in the book is she had to advise a restaurant. So it's about not just the atmosphere of the restaurant, but the food. And she has like this idea that when you're thinking about serving your turkey, just arranging it on the plate, can contribute to the happiness and satisfaction with the meals. They're just piling it on and schlepping it at people that you can. And I love to. I've become like a hobbyist in flower arrangements and things. And
you are an aesthete. I mean, you have mastered the art of
but I've developed
aesthetic intelligence.
It's
yes.
sort of looking around your house, looking at tables and just thinking, how can I make this nicer? And it has this is maybe what Better Angel should do. It has a civilizing effect when you come into a room or you sit down at a table and there's been effort. I think it has a great effect on everybody.
Humanizing, and does a lot of it have to do with symmetry and balance?
No, I don't know. It's just, but it's something, and Pauline will tell us all and discuss how we learn it and apply it to ourselves. But it's just something maybe to think about going into this holiday. How can we make it nicer, but in a way that's going to make us nicer, if that makes sense. And we're going to need it this year.
We're going to need it.
All right, let's take a quick break and then bring on Pauline.
So, Danielle, The Spectator magazine is launching in America. And for those who don't know, The Spectator is the longest-running magazine in the English language, having been produced in the UK for 191 years. And now it has launched its U.S. edition.
I read the British Spectator growing up. I loved it. I still read it. It's fun. It's lively. And it's in, Dead Tree Edition. It's being delivered monthly. The U.S. edition follows much of the same path as the UK magazine, delivering fearless, beautifully written, and impeccably sourced journalism. What I like most about it, it's got that British spirit in that it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's a fun and funny read full of wit and wisdom.
And amazing contributors, including Christopher Buckley, P.J. O'Rourke, Julie Bindel, God, I love Julie, Lionel Shriver, awesome, Douglas Murray, fabulous, Toby Young, wow, Roger Scruton, I love everyone, Rod Little. If you want a dose of British humor injected into American politics, this is for you.
Yes, free yourself of the rigid, boring, partisan politics of the U.S. The Specky doesn't fall into that category of left or right. It's first and foremost challenges, informs, and entertains its readers. And there's no risk to trying out a subscription. You will get your first issue for free, and you can cancel anytime.
So listeners, and if you want to help this podcast, please subscribe. It helps us. You can get their first issue free by going to spectator.us, subscribe, and then you use the code FEMSPLAIN.
That's right. So go to spectator.us/subscribe and use the code FEMSPLAIN to start your free trial today. Welcome to the Femsplainers.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm just delighted to be on the show.
Well, we're so excited to have you. Now, you aren't in the studio, so we can't offer you a cocktail, but maybe a virtual cocktail. What is your favorite drink?
A woman after my own heart. So, all-time favorite is Ruinart Champagne Blanc de Blanc. Which is not the most rarefied champagne out there. I just think it is so smooth and so good. And I'm not always a fan of bubbly drinks of any sort. I don't drink cola. I just love that Ruinart Blanc de Blanc.
Well,
Christina has almost stopped talking to me over the fact that I don't love champagne.
And she stopped drinking.
Well, just temporarily.
Which is,
yeah. But I love the sort of sweeter champagnes, which was how it was. You have the history of, or a brief history of Veuve Clicquot in your book, which was interesting because Madame Clicquot, it used to be as sweet as Coca-Cola, like for the Russian market originally when champagne was first made.
Interesting. You know more history on it than I even wrote about in the book. But what I love about Veuve Clicquot is not so much the taste of it. To be honest, it's not my favorite champagne. although it does do very well in the American market. But what I love about that brand is the story of Madame. Veuve, V-E-U-V-E, which is the Veuve of Veuve Clicquot, is the French word for widow. And this is a woman who, after losing her husband at the ripe old age of 28 and having several children, I think 4 or 5, to raise, she did something that was unspeakable in the late 1700s, early 1800s. She took over the family business. And at the time, it was actually disallowed for women to run any sort of enterprise. They were not allowed to sign checks. They were not allowed to have employees. They were not allowed to essentially do anything that would constitute a business job. But the only exemption to that, which she had to enforce, is if they were widowed and if the ongoing sustenance of the company depended on it. And so that is why she stepped in. And what's interesting is not only did she save the company, which would have clearly been, gone into foreclosure had she not taken over, but she led a few innovations around the champagne, around the way the champagne was made, and around the import-export of champagne products outside of the, central region of France that were pretty revolutionary at the time. So she was like one of the first female entrepreneurs that I know of in the history of enterprise.
Right. She created that process called rittling, where you put those bottles on sort of angles in holes, or hole boards, I guess, and you turn them so the sediment. Yeah, no, she's an amazing story. She is someone.
Super story. I keep waiting for the movie to come out. I just think it would be a lot of fun to watch her on the big screen. It's this old industry that she modernized by virtue of creating a system for just turning the bottle, which they still use today.
They still do.
200 years later.
All right. Well, let's tell us what is aesthetic intelligence. Let's set it up for our listeners and what you mean by it.
Sure. Well, let's start with what is aesthetics, because I was very mindful when I wrote the book. And even before I wrote the book, I taught a course called The Business of Aesthetics, and I was very mindful not to make it about the business of beauty or the business of design or the business of artistry. Aesthetics comes from the Greek word aesthetikos, which has to do with perception of the senses. And it's not altogether unrelated to, say, anesthesiology, right, which is a numbing of the senses. So when you think of a great aesthetic experience, obviously, you think of something that is beautiful to look at, but it doesn't stop with visual elegance. It's also how it maybe tastes or feels or smells. Aesthetics is about delighting each or some combination of all the senses. And aesthetic intelligence is the ability by an individual to, A, understand what feels good to them sensorially, B, to understand how to deliver that particular aesthetic proposition for others, so recreating it, and C, what I call articulation. So a great aesthetic leader doesn't just know the difference between a fine wine or a cheap, not so fine wine, but also can actually put into words what made the fine wine that much finer, and can mobilize other people toward that vision. So if you think about it in business terms, so someone like a Steve Jobs, who was a smart guy, but he wasn't off the charts from an IQ standpoint. He wasn't Albert Einstein, and he certainly wasn't emotionally intelligent. By all estimates, the guy was, pretty low on emotional intelligence, but his ability to mobilize thousands and thousands of people in the Apple Corporation and get them toward a vision that felt good and looked good to him, that articulation was part of his aesthetic genius.
But wasn't that also, as Christina's speaking, wasn't that sort of revolutionary in the computer industry? Because so often you go into, you look at products created by engineers and they lack an aesthetically pleasing. They're totally utilitarian. And he had the idea that it should be elegant. It should be feel good, and you should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the problems, there are several. I mean, one of the many problems is that in a lot of businesses and a lot of professions, that we as a society put a huge premium on sort of linear logical thinking, problem solving, cracking the code, analyzing big data, generating solutions, and in the process, and that is the classic, approach of any engineer, sort of depersonalizing the equation. In the process, we lose the sense of what makes people, delighted, what makes them feel alive, what makes them come together, the fact that on the other end, whether it's an industrial concern or a computer product that you're marketing, you still have a human that's buying it, a human that has emotional reactions. And so, yes, with regards to Steve Jobs, I think he envisioned that a product that historically had been valued for no other reason than microprocessing power, like how much smaller can we make this device, and how much faster can it go, and how much cheaper can it get? But nobody ever even thought, well, how can we make it actually feel good? How can we, Steve Jobs always had this saying, the back of my computers look better than the front of any Microsoft product. Right. And he's right.
This has been a recent and revolutionary approach to retailing that you wrote about, and actually you were very and early aware of that this whole focus on the mass experience was changing. And I guess maybe with online shopping, with these sort of smaller breakout brands, we're recognizing that people didn't just they wanted stories behind their products. They wanted an experience with their products. And you said that people were no longer driven by this desire to accumulate material possessions, but to seek depth and meaning. Can you elaborate on that? And that is a fairly recent thing, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Well, this is the first era in human history where there's a inverse relationship between wealth and a population's average BMI, body mass index. In other words, we live in a time where the poorer you are, the more likely you are to be overweight. And the reason I bring this up is any other time in history, if you were lacking means, you were lacking in basic things to sustain yourself: food, clothing, shelter. Now, at least in the developed part of the world, which is where we live and which is a big part of the world, we don't need basic things just to get through. Now, that doesn't mean that the poorest segments are the healthiest segments or the best fed, but they certainly aren't starving, and they certainly aren't needing another T-shirt. And so we have, as a relatively plentiful time, we have a lot of our basic needs met. But at every segment of society, what we don't have, and I think what we're craving, is experiences that make us feel human, that make us feel alive. For every 1 hour, and most of us spend many more than 1 hour a day, many more hours on, say, a cell phone or another digital device, that is 1 hour where we're kind of sacrificing our sensorial activation or sensorial delight. So when I look at, for example, a digital device, my visual senses are stimulated, but even that, it's not very rich because it's two-dimensional, versus when I look at something in the flesh, I have a little bit more volume and a little bit more richness and deeper colors and so forth. Sound systems are getting ever better when we rely on their devices, but there's no device I've ever come across that would be as good as the sound quality of being in a concert hall, for example, listening to the same music, via a headphone versus in a concert hall. And then you take the other senses, tactility and smell and taste. They are utterly void in that. So my point being, not that at every hour of the day everybody has to be stimulating everything that makes them human, but there's a lot of us that is sort of bursting to feel alive again, and to feel the things that have made us human, for millennium. I mean, we talk a lot about all the changes in the last 10 years in terms of how people live or how they shop or how they connect with others. But we don't talk about the fact that 99% of what makes us human hasn't changed in hundreds of years or thousands of years. And so I sort of say, that the technological revolution has happened at much, much faster pace than our sort of primal human evolution. And as a result, the kind of things that we do want to spend money on that give us the kind of satisfaction that I'm suggesting are experiential, but they're experiential not just because they tell a good story, but because they bring us back into our primal state. And so when you look at trends like the popularity of restaurants or social clubs, or even for kids. I don't know if you followed the slime movement, the fact that, there isn't a 12-year-old girl on the planet, certainly not in the U.S., that isn't obsessed with slime, and they're watching videos about how to make slime. I just say, what is this obsession with slime? And I think it's because they want to use their fingers. That's the only thing the only way
I have missed the slime trend. Have you missed the slime
No,
trend?
but my niece had a birthday party and they went to a restaurant full of cats.
Okay. Cat cafe.
It was a cat cafe.
Interesting. I mean, so the other point I'll make, though, is in most experiences, the best experiences, we love not just because we love what we experience while we're engaging, but we love them because what we remember, and we love them because what we anticipate when we go back to that experience. And so, when you talk about this exciting birthday party, half of the fun was the fact that people are still talking about it weeks or months after the fact.
Yeah, I thought it was...
allow us to remember experiences are very, very exciting.
And a lot of what you say is rooted in evolutionary psychology, and humans are drawn to many of the things we find most beautiful are also conditions where we flourish, like falling water and greenery and the beauty of the human face, a youthfulness, a balance signifying health, and so forth. And as you say, as we move towards our phones, there's you're more and more cut off from nature, and from, I don't know if you could be sustained by looking at a forest on your screen. It doesn't do quite the same.
It's just not the same.
So how does this impact what's going on in business right now and in making a successful company, retail?
First of all, for the vast majority of companies that haven't begun to tap into how to make the buyer feel alive and feel excited and remember the experience, for the vast majority of companies, they're going by the wayside because people don't need their stuff, right? Because people are, if they're going to buy a face cream, unless, that face cream really offers something from a utilitarian standpoint that's breakthrough, they're going to get the cheapest thing available, the quickest thing. They're going to go to Amazon, and they're going to make it as frictionless as possible. So, and there's only room for so many Amazons, right, before the rest of retail dies away. But for the retailers or other businesses out there that are really tapping into this concept that I'm talking about, this sort of concept of aesthetic delight, they're in a league of their own. It's why, that Apple continues to be one of the most highly valued companies on the planet, even decades after Steve Jobs' death. It's why Walt Disney still sort of is able to attract people to the parks 70, 80 years after Walt passed away. It's because there are certain companies that just have it built into their DNA that it's not good enough just to sell utility. It's not good enough just to meet a customer need. They have to be able to meet something much richer and more profound.
I find
there are some companies that do it.
I find that when I walk by near me in Bethesda is an anthropology, and it's very alluring. It's sort of walking through a forest or something. So
it's interesting you say that. I know the architect who worked on the first 100 or so anthropology stores, and at the time they were complete rule breakers. There'd never been stores like that, and I'm going back to the 90s now. And one of the points that he made, because they would, for example, if you look at the Rockefeller Center location for Anthropology, they put a big staircase in the middle of the store. Now, most retailers, especially ones with as many locations as Anthro, think about sales per square foot and productivity. And they say, why would you take the most premium location in a store and build a big staircase in it? There's no logic to that. There's no business rationale. And his argument, which obviously management bought into, is, we're not about just moving stuff in a supermarket fashion. We're about creating an experience. And people coming into an anthropology are going on a hunt, and they're essentially walking through a forest. And if you think of the way forests exist, they're not lined up in perfect trees like supermarkets, with aisles and rows and, where everything that you would expect in one area is the frozen section and in another area is the box section. a forest, is organic and a little messy and kind of exciting and
It's surprising, yeah.
surprising.
Well, this is
And textural.
Well, this is you're super fascinating on sort of the decline of the department store, which is hitting both high and low ends. So we've watched very recently, Barney's collapse, Sears collapse, Dean and DeLuca, and Macy's, Bendel's,
Not Bendel's?
Bendel's,
Even Bendel's?
from that beautiful boutique store that it was on Fifth Avenue. So is this in part driven by, your sort of assumption would be like, well, it's the rise of online shopping, but you have a more complex view of this, that these are people who sort of lost the way, and a company like Anthropologie has adapted, whereas these companies simply didn't adapt to that kind of, I don't know, what would you call it, curated experience, aesthetic intelligence?
Right. Well, there are certain things that online will never deliver on, right? So there's certain things Amazon does supremely well. I would not want to compete with Amazon when it comes to logistics and supply chain, delivery, price. I don't want to compete with Amazon in price. But there are certain things Amazon cannot compete. If I'm Amazon, I can't compete with, Dover Street Market here in New York, which is a fashion sort of forward, trendy store. Why? Because that kind of a business, you have to come in, you have to feel it, you have to try it, you have to, you have to experience it in a way that is not consistent with their value proposition, which is about moving things quickly and seamlessly. Great shopping experiences shouldn't be seamless. They, just like if you think about great life experiences aren't ones that happen in 30 seconds and come at no cost and, are available to everybody out there. Great life experiences come because you've discovered it, because you worked for it, because you're learning and in good ways and in tough ways as you go through the process. And so the actual journey has to be quite different. And I think most of the retailers out there, that the ones you mentioned that are no longer relevant, they started to chase the wrong benchmarks. Barney's shouldn't be chasing Macy's, and Barnes and Noble should never have been chasing Amazon. And for the same reason, Target shouldn't be chasing Walmart. Target has to do what Target, because there's no room. They're not going to outdo Walmart at what Walmart does well, right? But they have to find where's the room in the market for what we do well, and what do we do well. And there are some stores, I think, that really understand that and preserve it at all costs, and that's what it takes. And many of the companies I've been associated with, like a Louis Vuitton, if I were just going to buy a Louis Vuitton trunk or wallet because I need a small leather item to hold my dollar bill, there's a lot of other places I could go to, and it'd be a lot cheaper and a lot easier. But I'm going there because I'm buying into an expression of a certain lifestyle that comes alive when I'm in that store, or even when I'm in the website, but particularly when I'm in the store.
Well, one of the things, I agree with you about this, and shopping, we say that, well, even if it's less curated an experience, you think, well, I still want to go try that on or touch it. Mm-hmm. But then I start thinking back to the times of when the internet was coming in and newspapers were all saying, people were saying like, somebody will always want the feel of newsprint and that curation that only the editors can do that you get with a newspaper. And we saw that go out the window. And one of the sort of fascinating retail stories I've been following personally, just not least because I love this site, which is Wayfarer. Wayfarer is more like a lifestyle curated Amazon, where and then they have these little sub stores like All Modern and Joss and Main. So they're in a way stealthily trying to create that boutique experience. Yeah, but still in that kind of massive way.
Right. Where I think something like Wayfarer has gone wrong and will be plagued is the lack of curation. So there's no question that they have much better presentation than, say, Amazon in terms of showing you this is the modern format, this is maybe the traditional or transitional, or the different style preferences. But within each of those, if I put in, I want a set of drawers, I put in a price point, I put in dimensions, I put in a color, maybe I even put in a style, I still will get 1,000 options. And I'm overwhelmed with those options. And so I always say that, if there's a few steps for the individual as well as the corporation to go through to really exercise good taste, the first step being just basic awareness, the last step, which so few companies and individuals do well, is what I call curation. Saying what you're not going to include, not because it's not nice, not because it doesn't meet the criteria that you might want or someone else might want, but it's because that's the discipline that's required. That's what Coco Chanel did so well back in the day. Her classic line that before I go to the house, I always take one thing off. That restraint is what gives somebody good taste. And I always say good taste doesn't come from money. In fact, money can be a liability because if you don't have to make hard trade-offs, you probably won't. But good taste is about making good trade-offs and thoughtfulness.
Is there a
Wayfarer doesn't have the trade-offs that make it a really exciting shopping experience.
Right. Is there a reason why hospitals, like hospital operating rooms, for example, I had to have rotator cuff surgery, and I just couldn't help wanting to make some interior decoration suggestions because it was the most dehumanizing. It was perfectly, the decor was perfect for, like an autopsy, but not a human being.
Funny.
And the lighting, I understand they need the bright lights, but they could tone it down right as you go in there.
Right.
The whole thing was so, and I just thought they needed
and airports too.
Airports
are,
and
they're
Penn
involved.
Station is really almost a human rights violation.
Yeah. So I always say the two most unaesthetic mass experiences are airports and hospitals. And here's the thing. In both cases, forget about the budget. Like many of them would say, well, we are processing, thousands of people up from this wing to that wing each day, and we need to make sure that it happens efficiently. I get it. But somebody still had to decide what kind of bulb to put in that light socket. Somebody still had to decide what shade of flooring to put. If you had to put a really durable floor, there still were, dozens and dozens of choices of shades and patterns. Somebody had to decide what color palette to put on the walls because there was a shade of paint or a coat of paint. And why didn't they have that one person who made the decision do it with in mind, how does it make other people feel? There's a few stages in making things beautiful. And the first stage is just do, sort of like with hospitals and doctors, do no harm. And there's a lot of harm done in these spaces and how they're pulled together aesthetically.
Well,
and then,
sorry.
And then I was going to say the second problem is that because, for example, in the case of hospitals, doctors and nurses and other practitioners are trained to look at people really as sort of cars to be fixed in the sense that an auto mechanic fixes a car. There's such a dehumanizing experience for them in terms of how they're trained and how they, are measured, the metrics that go on, that, no wonder they're not even attuned to how debilitating it is, not just for the patients, but for the workers too.
And the patients.
One of the points,
and the
patients, everybody, and think of the family members that are sitting in god-awful waiting rooms. Why does it have to be so unpleasant? They're already in a great state of anxiety and distress. And studies have shown there are certain colors, there are certain textures that will put people more at ease, but it's the lack of empathy that I object to in these very critical environments.
Yeah, and they're discovering now like patients will actually do better in better, more wellness-oriented environments.
They could just decorate the operating rooms with primary colors. That would be an improvement.
Or Laura Ashley Walton.
Certainly school. We've seen
arrow and ball paint.
School. Where children learn better. Why can't the walls of a elementary school be friendly?
Yeah.
It inevitably will make them feel more excited to be in that environment, more joyful, more tended to.
Well, let's bring this to, because the other part of your book that I just was really, I have to say, gripped by is how you can bring this idea of aesthetic intelligence to yourself. And we're talking about, I mean, I'm sure people are listening and going, well, that's all fine. This is very elite. It's just going to be costly. I think there's an element that people get nervous about in terms of trying to develop a style that is going to be costly. But it's also, it's hard to develop a style, we are overwhelmed by choice. You do go into these stores. Right. There's 600 T-shirts, and
you get talked into things.
You get talked in.
Right.
You get
by
bullied.
Friends. You get bullied by friends.
No, salespeople.
And you.
I save you.
Okay,
I save you from the
that's
salespeople.
True.
but that.
Right. So I always say, and it takes a lot of work, like every muscle. You have to work. Even people who are born gifted on any one dimension, somebody who's a great chef or a great perfume formulator, it has a wonderful sense of aroma. They have to work at it day in and day out, and in sort of small incremental ways to keep it sharp. And so the first step, I always say, for anybody, even if you're just a housewife and you're shopping for the kids and you're going to buy a T-shirt, you don't know if you should go with this one or that one, is just being mindful of the differences. So if I pick up 3 T-shirts, there are times where it really doesn't matter. They're all white T-shirts, they're all V-necks, they're all made, from cotton. I just should get the cheapest one. But there are times where I say, you know what, my child or my husband or myself, I'm going to be sitting for a 12-hour stretch in that. And does it have the right texture on my skin? Does it breathe? Does it fit on the shoulder such that I feel that that it's well situated in my body? I mean, it starts with, how do things feel on you and around you, and in your mouth, And so I always say, if you're going to make a great meal, the first step is not picking every ingredient in your kitchen that you like and just throwing it in a pot and boiling it. That does not make a great meal. It's really about thinking about how things come together. And the more mindful you are of the effect of these individuals, and the more imagination you use about how does it feel all coming together. And then the last piece is, how do you want to feel? So there are times I'm in the city, New York City. I sometimes do things and I'm very visible and I'm going from place to place and I'm up on a stage and I want to feel a certain way. Maybe I want to feel emboldened. Maybe I want to feel colorful. Maybe I want to feel modern. And there are other times I want to feel comfortable and I want to feel protected. And maybe it's because I'm watching TV with my daughter and we're, cozying up. And for me to be able to associate clearly with whether it's what I'm wearing or the space I'm creating around me and how that makes me feel, allows me to be more holistic in my life. When I sit in that waiting room in a hospital and the fluorescent light is coming down, it makes me feel bad on top of what is already probably a bad experience. So good taste starts with just being aware of how things feel. And sometimes you have a choice to change it. If I'm in the waiting room, I have no choice. I'm not going to bring my own set of light bulbs. But
you know what? I might.
Pink ones.
I've redecorated hotel rooms.
You know what? And God bless you. God bless you. I wish more people would. But most of us won't go that far. But why not, if you're going to buy a dress, as many of us do, at any price point, not just to look at, does it fit or is it the color I wanted, but how does it feel on my body, and how does it make me feel in terms of what I'm projecting? The more evolved we are individually, and again, it takes time and it takes consciousness, the more we start to show who we are and the more confident we feel as we go through our life. So I'm very, very aware of space design. When I was writing my book, I was in my home office and I spent more hours in there than I had ever spent before, because most of my prior jobs and assignments were, more out in the field. And I was not going to be stimulated to do good work if I wasn't in an environment that really brought out the best of me. And I didn't take a huge decorating budget. What it took is putting pictures on the wall that actually elicited the right feelings, it having colors around me that that excite me, of having a view into nature that kind of made me feel free and open. And so that, my space is a big piece. And I always say, when it comes to people's offices, they don't spend nearly as much time as they, say, do when it comes to decorating their bedrooms. And why do we think we actually spend more conscious hours in our offices for most people than we do conscious hours in our bedroom? Why do we think the bedroom should be, personalized in terms of the pillows on the bed or the way we lay out the drawers, whereas our offices should be as, depersonalized and generic and institutional as everyone else's? Why can't we bring a little bit more of ourselves into that space as well?
Well, I agree with this so wholeheartedly, but I have a question to ask you. I am totally on board with you, and I have cared. I once read there was a diagnosis in 19th century France, desperation for beauty. And I have this desperation for beauty. And my late husband did not, and I would tell him, oh, let's go to this shop. I can get you you'll look great. I'll give you a great look. And he says, I don't want a great look. You're like, I was crazy that I'd want. He was a philosophy professor.
I think it's a general husband problem.
Well, for sure, I think women pay a lot more attention than men, which doesn't mean men aren't affected. I mean, I don't know too many men who, are attracted to women they're not attracted to, right? So they care about it, but they harness it in very particular ways. I don't know too many men who, want to get the most distasteful beer on the shelf instead of the best tasting beer on the shelf. Like they still care.
Yes, they do.
Decided that certain types of stimuli are not manly or not worth their while.
But there have been studies that show a slightly different aesthetic. With women, there's more of a predilection for bright colors and surfaces replete with details, and curves rather than straight lines. And then men, it's darker colors and fewer details and utilitarian. Above all, functional utilitarian.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that is socializing or socialized taste. And historically, it has not been considered manly or masculine for a man to want to decorate himself. It's not the case in nature. I mean, look at peacocks, right?
Yeah, or the 18th century men, aristocratic men certainly decorate themselves.
Right. But I think we've lived in a world where the man is there to sort of get things done and the woman's there to adorn. And we've taken elements of adornment and made them frivolous and made them, that's about soft skills. It's not doesn't really add value, but it's nice to have. But the reality is, I would say, there's a lot of value that's created, and some of that age-old association has to be undone. It really isn't. I don't think it's natural to what the human species is calling for.
And we need both. In fact,
we need both.
But you
we
also,
need both. I'm certain. Yeah.
So, sorry.
I was. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the utilitarian
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm by no means am I sort of suggesting that utility is not important, or that when we're buying products, function and features and the sort of cost-benefit analysis shouldn't be factored in. Of course it should, but not at the expense or the dismissal of all these other criteria, which also make a difference, which also matter.
And there's something just assaultive about the sort of these strips that are outside every suburban town, where they'll just have a KFC and a Burger King, and mostly devoted to parking lots and stores that are set back, and then it's restricted, so you can't have multiple use. So it can only be shops. You can't have apartments, and so that means people aren't going to invest very much money. They just want to get as much a dollar as they can for the space. And we've done this across the country, and it's and then that's dehumanizing to be in those strip malls.
Yes, and that to me is an extension of what we were talking about earlier, which is, the Industrial Revolution, which we're now on the other side, although most businesses haven't caught up with the rest of society. It was all about scale and efficiency, and minimizing costs, and it was appealing to this sort of growing middle class of people who were not particularly respected for their taste or their emotional needs. It was about feeding the masses. And I think in the process, it sort of dehumanized the way we lived, and it numbed our senses. So if you live in a modern city, anywhere in America, you are inevitably tuning out a lot of the sounds and a lot of the smells and a lot of the textures because that's how you get by. But the reality is then you take that exact same person who lives day in and day out and might commute, on subways or buses, and you sort of put them in a beautiful mountainous, retreat environment, and all of a sudden, like, they become a different person. And it doesn't even take long. People reconnect with their senses very quickly when you give them a taste of it.
Well, and that goes to what we were saying about personal style too. And that these places that are so dehumanizing, I mean, when you are in an airport or anywhere, any crowded place, and you look around and you think of the old, when you watch, not movies so much, movies, but also like film of street scenes in New York in the 30s or 40s or 50s. And people are really dressed up, aside from men wearing hats and things. And today you look around, it's in some ways, people have embodied. You have this idea that you talked about that our work selves, our public selves, should be the same as our indoor selves, and to you, that's elevating what you do inside. But most people are walking around in like their pajamas. I mean, it seems like no one is taking time to think about what they're projecting in public, and it's all about comfort, and they don't really care. So I guess even my question to how does one develop a personal style, we have to get people starting to care again how they're appearing in public. Is that fair?
I mean, I think you have to start by caring how you feel individually. I've got to believe that somebody who is wearing a gray hoodie day in and day out, whether they're sleeping in their dorm room-like bedroom or whether they're going to their cubicle at the office, I got to believe that person has also essentially lost their own sense of wonder and pride and enjoyment. That person is not maximizing who he or she is. It's not that person has to be formal, and I'm certainly not a proponent if somebody likes wearing flats that they should wear high heels if that's not, what feels right to him or her, or usually her. My point being that the mindfulness is really where this starts to come alive. And most people who resort to that kind of casual attire day in and day out that you described, it's because they really are indifferent. And that's a shame because at the end of the day, when you think about AI taking over almost every function, of work and home life, you sort of say, well, what's left? What are the things that computers and robots will not take over? And one of them is sort of expressing our humanity. I think, I could imagine AI taking over every fast food restaurant. There should be nobody, flipping burgers in the back. But AI will not take over what a Daniel Boulud or William Puck or a Wolfgang Puck are able to do in coming up with sort of new menus for their very, very luxurious environments. And it's not that we all should, be dining at Daniel Boulud. It's that we have to value that there's certain things that these people are doing at a very high level that we should aspire to, because that's really still valid and important and valuable. The rest, let it go to the computers.
What do you foresee as the future of shopping? And are we? I mean, before you mentioned this, there'll be special
I don't
stores.
think stores will go away.
No,
I don't think stores.
They won't be replaced by robots.
No, but they'll be replaced by screens.
So I think there'll be, and I don't even think screens will work for a lot of categories. So, for example, if I do my shopping on a Fresh Direct, which is a direct-to-consumer website that delivers here in the New York area, I'm very comfortable getting, fulfillment of grape nuts or Horizon milk or what have you. But prepared foods, I'm still on the fence. There's no replacing for me, to the extent that there's a good specialty grocer in the area looking at how things are prepared and feeling that that's actually appetizing for me as opposed to just looking at a picture of it. So I think that there'll be, very broadly speaking, two kinds of stores. I think anything that is selling a product that is primarily functional, meaning I need socks because I need socks, or I need milk because I need milk, that can go online. There's no reason I should ever spend 5 minutes of my day going to a grocery store to get milk or socks, another store for socks. But I think anything that requires the kind of mindfulness that I'm talking about, whether it's things that, a lot of the shopping we do is a form of entertainment. It stimulates our imagination. It gives us aspirations, allows us to dream. When I go to the cosmetics counter, let's just say the, Estee Lauder or Chanel cosmetic counter, yes, I need, or I think I need a new shade of lipstick. But if I really just needed a red lipstick, I can go online. What I need is the imagination of what that can do, how that will look, the idea that I can try it and I can feel it on my lips and I can see, as opposed to just imagining through some, digital display. Like that still has great purpose and great meaning for people. And I see it, when I was at LVMH, I ran North America division. One of our larger divisions was Sephora. Now, Sephora has a very strong online business, but the reality is that women and girls going into a Sephora store, they love it. They don't go in there because they need a replenishment, of their, fresh soy cleanser. They go in there because they want to discover what's new, because they want to try things on, because they like browsing, and they spend a lot of time. And that is not the same experience when you go to Sephora.com.
And it's also a social experience, as you say, because it's so much fun to go with your friends.
Absolutely. For some categories more than others. Yes.
You also talked about in the future, I thought this was fascinating because it could also very much describe our politics today. You spoke about tribal secession and that we are all going into retreating into our own little tribes. And you said, as a reaction to globalization and threats to local cultures, languages, and ways of life, we've seen a rapid growth of, we're familiar with this here, identity politics, tribalism, localism, activism. And more than ever, people seek to belong to groups that represent mutual feelings, shared values, and common goals. And so you think or suggested that retail was going to reflect this anxiety that we feel, this lack of control that we feel, this desire to be with people like us that is going on, and that we're ushering in this age of hyper-localism. And that's reflected in these, I guess, more smaller organic brands. I don't just mean organic, as...
Yeah.
But like...
And I mean, what are the examples I use in that section? So when I was coming of age and I got my, my first high-end bra, which what I perceived as high-end, I'd go to Victoria's Secret. And everything about Victoria's Secret essentially suggested a certain archetype of what it meant to be a sexy woman. And, they were able to capture that through their runways, through their choice of models, through the displays, the sort of boudoir-like setting. Now I look at my daughter, for example, who's mid-teens, and Victoria's Secret is so out of keeping with what feels or even, what feels sexy to her, what she wants to represent. And it's not that she wouldn't look at any one of those elements and appreciate, the way maybe the bra sits on her chest or the way the model is appearing. It's the way the whole campaign came together, which was actually very oppressive to 90% of women out there who are, who don't have that figure, who don't, have that look, or who even don't want to look sexy for men, And so I joined the board and invested in a small company called Tomboy X. Tomboy X was founded by a lesbian couple in Seattle. They had no background in intimates, which is what they sell. But their whole thing when they started 5-6 years ago was, as lesbians in a marital situation, like we're still women. We don't want to wear men's Hanes, which is what they were wearing. But we don't want to feel like that brand makes us feel. And so they came up with their own line. And it had briefs, but it was still briefs that were made for women, not men. And they made it more playful by bringing rainbow colors in and so forth. And they started just by marketing it at pride marches to their tribe, and which was primarily middle-aged, larger size, gay or bi women, and they took off. and they only sold direct. And my point isn't that that's going to be the next Victoria's Secret. That will never be even 10% the size of a Victoria's Secret. But it doesn't need to be, because there are dozens and dozens of these other brands that are saying that there's a different way that we can express how we feel intimate wear should feel on the body or should look to others or who we're trying to appeal to. And so I think the good news with this particular sort of fractured brand environment is that it's giving so many more voices to, movements and cultures that were underinvested, that were undersupported, that were overlooked. That's the good news. I mean, the bad news, if you're a consumer, if you're a shopper, is it's very confusing, because there's no higher up anymore that says, you want to be cool? This is the one go-to store, or the one go-to brand. And people really, have to figure out for themselves where they fall in all this and what makes them feel good and why.
Yep. Before we go, this is such a fascinating discussion. We are coming up to the biggest shopping day online and in stores.
People die.
People die.
Crazy.
Any tips?
Don't die. It's not worth it.
Any tips for how we approach? I guess this is a broader question too, of how we should approach. You talked before about how does it feel to the skin, but really finding ourselves, defining ourselves, not just going for that big bargain, but how do we become better discerning shoppers who are good for us?
Maybe we should have anti-shopping, because I find after reading Marie Kondo, I want fewer things.
I think you're on
I want
trend.
fewer things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're onto something, actually. So first of all, I would say for most people, let's broaden definition of what is a gift. So for me, for example, when my mother says, you know what, I know you're going away for a week. I want to take your beloved puppy, which is my 8-year-old baby named Boo, and I want to, indulge him by not only giving him 2 walks a day, but I'm going to take him in and take care of him when you're gone and make sure that he's as happy there as he would be with you. To me, that is such a gift, because I get anxiety before I go on a vacation about poor Boo. I'm not going to put him in and that's just one of a gazillion examples I could give you, that gifts are not just about stuff. Gifts are about, what can you do to make that person's life more joyful, maybe easier, maybe more secure. And so, and then the other thing I would say is that, I've run into this problem for years. I tend to give gifts that deep down I really want, right? So I'm always looking for what excites me.
Yeah.
And one of the points I make in aesthetic intelligence is that, to be really gifted on that front, you have to have empathy. Because there are certain things that I know, if I really put my mind to it, that whether it's my daughter, my son, my dog will love, that I wouldn't want. I don't want a bone, but I give my dog a bone, and he's over the moon, and some bones mean more to him than others. So I think that, getting to this place where you really stop thinking about and projecting, like, what do I want, or what do I want for that person? I might, want to get for a friend a shirt that I think will look good on them because I think it'll look good to me, as opposed to deep down thinking what'll feel good to them. So that would be my 2 bits of advice would be, number one, broaden this definition of what is a gift. And the more you can move away from just pure stuff that's going to sit idle, but things that kind of make their life better, whether it's through an experience or through a service or through even, I've had friends who, they have careers, they do, very exciting things with their own professional services, and they've offered to apply that to me in some capacity. That is a gift. And then number 2 is really understanding the other person and maybe feeling less prone to giving everybody something, and the people that you really care about, giving them the best thing that they'll remember. Ask yourself, in 6 months right from now, if I ask that person, would he or she remember what I got him or her for Christmas? If the answer is no, then I'd say you're probably better off getting nothing.
And for ourselves, disciplining ourselves, like when we go and we want to figure out what we want to buy. I mean, in terms of clothes and things, like one rule I've remembered that I think like a friend of mine's mother once said, like she said, never buy a top or a bottom that you don't have the top or the bottom to go with it. That we get it.
That's smart.
Yeah,
You'll never find it.
You'll never find it. So we get it. What are just like a quick couple of shopping tips so we don't end up with all these crazy great bargains of things we're never going to, or we're just not going to wear.
Right. So first things first, before you do any more shopping, this idea of shopping in your own closet, I think, is important. Oftentimes, and it's hard to do ourselves because we get into these ruts where we have kind of kept our closets in pretty much the same order and the same organizational fashion. And and we don't really think about it with a fresh lens. And sometimes I think it takes a friend or even a professional to come in before you spend another $1 on an additional top or skirt or dress, is just to have that person rethink even the whole ordering of how do you set things up and challenging you to maybe things you assume that shirt could never go with those boots or with that skirt, but somebody else having this fresh lens would say, well, maybe it can. Mm-hmm. And so breaking down some of the walls that we set up and some of the rules that we've adhered to, because all of a sudden, like I know twice a year, I go through my closet because I want to, which is basically in the Northeast predicated by seasonal change, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got my spring, summer, and my fall, winter. And every time I finish it, and I dread the day that I have to, bring all the winter stuff up and put the rest away and decide what goes in the garbage. I dread the day. It's painful, it's long and laborious. But at the end of it, I almost feel like I have a completely new wardrobe because it's a reminder of what we have, and it forces me to reorganize. So I think that going through that initial process before you go back to the store will give you a very different frame to decide where the holes are and where the additional delight can really come from.
That's great advice, yes.
And I now know what I'm going to give you for Hanukkah.
An experience?
No. Yes. I'm going to promise to be on time for everything.
That would be so good. I love it. All right. Well, Pauline, thank you. The book is Aesthetic Intelligence, How to Boost It and Use It in Business and Beyond. Such a great book. And it's such a thrill having you and all your amazing expertise and insights. So
thank you.
And you're a wonderful philosopher and a great life coach, all in one.
Oh, thank you. Wow, that means a lot to me. That's the best gift I got all day. Thank you so much for the time and the interest and the high praise.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay. All the best.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, that was fascinating, and there's so much to think about, and I'm going to follow her advice.
Well, you and I always shop together. I think we've mentioned this in the past on the podcast where first of all, we shop together because we trust each other and we never trust a salesperson.
Oh, because
they lie.
Oh, that looks so great. And they have it worked out. It's part of the marketing campaign. Right. They come around and tell you how great it looks.
Right. But you and I go because we're truth tellers. But we worked at your style, your dangerous style.
Yeah, left to my
you have to be saved from.
Is a hippie math teacher.
And the thing I have to be saved from is...
Oh, yes. The housewives
Kris
of...
Jenner. Or Real Housewives.
And our girlfriend Megan is astronaut's wife.
From the 1960s. She likes things with big buttons and
shifts. Lots of shifts and
boxy things.
Boxy. But give me like I want like a macrame shawl.
But you should be glamorous, and you are. And now we've got you in a little fur trimmed shawl.
I know. And somebody tweeted they made an issue of the fact that they thought that I looked better on Bill Maher in 2019 but in the last time I was on 2014.
And who are you grateful to for that?
I'm grateful to you. I'm going to thank you on Thanksgiving for saving me from my inner math teacher.
We shop for each other. We improve each other. Okay, so I think we just have a tiny bit of time, but I want gratitude for our listeners. We love hearing from you. Gratitude for our patrons. We'll have a little listener reaction, and then those who decide to help us out will get to hear Christina's rant. So, Ella, let's catch up on some of our listener comments.
Yeah, so the first one is from Martin. He says, I am a 53-year-old father of 3 daughters and 3 sons. I'm also a podcast junkie and have recently downloaded a bunch of the Femsplainers episodes. In general, I have found you guys quite enlightened and sensitive to the plight of both men and women in our clown world reality in the dying West.
Oh, he's an optimist.
Just tonight, I was listening to the episode with your daughters entitled, Why Are Millennials Having So Little Sex? I couldn't stop myself from yelling at my phone repeatedly at the massive elephants in the room that you all conveniently avoided, aka ballooning sexual assault and harassment charges against men only, fake rape charges, #MeToo, ballooning divorce rates, female initiation of 75% of divorce cases, lack of female legal responsibility for intoxicated sex, and generally the nuclear destruction of dating, marriage, chivalry, etc. by third and fourth wave feminism. Were you guys intoxicated for that episode?
Whoa. Well, he sounds like he's going to have a great Thanksgiving.
Can you imagine?
I don't think, Martin, you haven't listened to enough of our podcasts. I think if we were to talk about those things how many, okay, come on, Ella, Christina, how many episodes
Have we dedicated to the
this?
plight of...
To the degree that we have to, like, I'm always saying, okay, we got to go easy a bit on the culture war stuff because we do it every episode.
And we seem to take the side of men, but we do that because nobody's taking their side, and they are vulnerable to harm as much as women, but in different ways in some cases.
We've talked, Martin, I think.
But, you know, in
Martin needs
fairness to
go
Morton, he's
Better
got...
Angels.
Martin.
We love you, Martin, but you sound like you're angry and you haven't fully given us a chance. I would suggest you go back through our episodes, through the iTunes or on our website, and just go through all the episodes that...
But you know what?
discuss
I have to admit, he's going to like my rants.
Oh.
So
You should listen to the Emily Yaffe episode.
Yeah, go to the Emily Yaffe episode. That was about the Jonathan Kamen case. LA Times, very recent. This season, Mark.
But I think he's right. I can imagine if we didn't we mention that at
I'm
all?
sure we mentioned something, but we have talked about
You probably edited that part out. I probably held forth on that.
You know what, Christina? Guilty as charged. You had a whole discourse that addressed every single point Martin just made.
And it was accidentally, like the Nixon tape. It was accidentally erased.
All right. Well, Martin, welcome to the Femsplainers. We'll hope you get more satisfaction going forward.
All right. So this is from Sarah. She says, Love Femsplainers. I'm of the same generation. I turned 60 this year and share many of your concerns and perspectives. While I feel very comfortable talking about careers, I truly don't know what to tell my daughters about marriage and raising a family. May I make a suggestion? Something I don't think gets enough attention. Talk about the role of money in marriage. My more feminine and practical self knows firsthand how important expectations regarding lifestyle and money are when it comes to any partnership. Financial hardship has destroyed plenty of marriages. Also, when the women are the ones who are the major breadwinners, how does that affect the rules? What tacit assumptions are made but not discussed or agreed upon? How much should one's current salary or financial worth affect their marriageability? What difference does it make if they're relatively equal or one partner has a lot more? Keep up the good work. It's as important now as it was in the 90s.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, but
Good question.
we have to answer her question, and I have no idea because first of all, I'm terrible with money, and my husband and I had absolutely, couldn't have been more different approaches, and he was very careful and very worried about money, although he was an absent-minded professor, so he left it all to me.
Oh, it's like two drunks in control of the liquor cabinet.
Yeah. So I managed it all, and it did not always go well, but I had ways of...
Well, I guess it's
disguising that.
To speak to Martin's point about, these traditionally things that have been left, that women always go. I think I even pulled it and then we never discussed it about it. It still remains true that women look to men as providers and find success more attractive. That's their primary attraction to men, and men are remain primarily attracted by looks. But she's right. I mean, it's not the old world where a woman, if she wants to stay home with her children, and that's really what we're talking about, is the financial sacrifices that are going to have to be made in the course of a marriage. Can she really afford to stay home? And then, of course, with the rise of single motherhood and divorce, there are women who just have to work and can't stay home. So it is a good point. Probably,
Is it like the main thing people fight about?
Gosh, probably. I'm just
because Fred and I, my late husband, we didn't really fight about that much. We fought about his driving.
I think that's as you get older. No, I think maybe this is a point. Is we spend so much time, funnily, and especially women and young women, talking about, what their career is going to be, what training, what this, that, everything, but nothing about relationships, about, if a couple is going to get married, going through counseling together in advance, whether it's with their, religion, with their rabbi or priest, or even just, I think there must be premarital counseling where you kind of talk through these issues, and especially money,
and then methods of raising children. Because I am just passionate about never hitting a kid, spanking, and I just think it's terrible. I mean, once in a while, if they deserve it, you can. I mean, if it just happens instinctively, but. Saying you're getting a whipping, or then this terrified child, and it's demeaning. It was a joke. No, but if you were married to somebody who believed in some kind of strict, insane, physical punishment, I would divorce.
Well, I think that's right. I think you put as much thought, and this is maybe the problem, what we were talking about earlier between cohabiting and marriage, that people who are cohabiting are kind of maybe even falling into the situation without having worked. It's like, okay, we'll save a lot of money on rent, but you're not working through any of the big issues. And if you're getting married without talking through a lot of these things very consciously, I think, our listener is absolutely right. And money's going to come up. And I think it surprises a lot of men today still when they've married a woman and she says, when I have a kid, I'm going to keep working and we're going to do this 50-50. And it's very unrealistic. And
because a lot of women don't want to do that.
Or if she's not going to work, that's really going to have an impact, obviously, on their lifestyle and their finances. And maybe they've taken a house
and then he's going to feel overburdened.
And he's going to feel resentful. These are things that it's very important to talk through. So yes.
But if you talk through too many things, it's going to feel like therapy, like why, don't you think there was something?
I think you can do it also over, you don't have to do it in one discussion. I think over the course of dating, when it's serious, these are times to start raising these things. Anyway, that's good point. All right, next listener.
So this is from Vernon.
Oh, Vernon. Hi, Vernon. Vernon writes to us all the time.
He says, I'm a little late, but I just wanted to say that I enjoyed the episode where you guys spoke at Nashville with the audience. I really appreciated Christina sticking up for the gamers when the Gamergate issue was brought up. I'm not sure if she is privy to this, but so much of the gaming world, be it digital or tabletop, is being overrun by woke culture, and that's definitely frustrating to some of us who just want to play our games.
Oh, God, I so sympathize, and I'm going to do a whole Gamergate issue. Episode. Still a writer here. A whole Gamergate episode for our Patreon supporters.
For Patreons, okay. If patrons want to sign up and then say, we want a Gamergate Patreon episode, we will do it. If there's enough of you, we will do it. But it is, I mean, the woke culture is affecting how? I mean, it's not just
monitoring the games and, if they have a sexy girl, that's the catering to the male gaze, and they use this annoying language from cultural studies to critique the games, and the players get irritated. I get irritated, and I don't play games.
All right. Thanks, Vernon.
You're right, Vernon.
So this is from Matt. He says, I'm a huge fan of the podcast. I used to listen to your show while I mowed the lawn, but now I listen to you after my family has gone to bed. I've been secretly working on making Christmas gifts for my wife. She is very tall and has difficulty finding pajamas that fit well, so this is so sweet. I've spent the last 4 months learning how to sew to make her better fitting clothes.
Oh.
And I've been listening to your podcast while I'm working on it. You're always interesting and giving me good food for thought as I slowly learn how to make gifts for my family. Femsplainers, breaking stereotypes one listener at a time. Keep doing what you do.
That reminds me of something so wonderful. So my late husband, Fred, who was a logician and philosophy professor, and that man had no domestic skills, but he could sew.
Really?
Not really, but he did it sometimes. He would mend things. I once asked him, because he'd grown up as an Orthodox Jew, and and he would say, "I've got tailor jeans, the tailor jeans." But early in our love affair, we were in Greece, and I bought this long skirt, but it was kind of too long, and I needed to hem it, but it was, when you put it down, it was huge. There was just formed this circle that went on, and I woke up the next morning, and it had been done.
Like an elf.
That's what he said. He said, the elf worked all night long, and he sewed my skirt. And it was so, if you had known Fred, it was so opposite of what you would expect. Well, anyway, I'm very pleased with our listener. He's doing that for his wife.
And also, I like, speaking of us you're breaking one stereotype at a time. But to your point about men and sewing, my late stepfather, my beloved late stepfather, was a soldier, and he could sew on. There were basic sewing skills. He could sew on a button. I'm sure that's
a badge.
A badge. You learn to mend something or hem something. And so when my kids, as part of their, 13-year-old bar bat mitzvah induction into adulthood, I made, especially my son, had to do a series of skills to prove they were adults. One was cook like a family meal, preferably like roasting a chicken on their own.
Was this like a feminist intervention?
No, it was for all girls and boys, the same task. And you had to be able to sew on a button. That was just, and so my son had to learn to sew on a button. And I think, these are skills that benefit all human Well, that's beings. A wonderful story. Happy Thanksgiving. And
I will say just one thing is that Fred, later on, my son had torn something, and Fred said, "I'll take care of it." And I thought, "Oh, he's going to sew." He glued it. He glued the shirt.
He used what? Paper clips?
No, he used pipe cleaners to fix things, and if that didn't work, crazy glue. And the glue would get all over his clothes and his fingers. It was everything.
Okay, that's a great letter.
So for our last listener reaction for today, this is from Earl. He says, "Hello, Femsplainers. Big fan of your show. I'm a gay band leader for a burlesque show here in Nashville. Johnny Gow Wow is my stage name, and the Alley Cat Cabaret is my stage game. We were terribly disappointed to hear that Christina went to 2nd Avenue of all the trashy places, instead of coming up to the more libertine part of town and catching our show. Next time you're in Nashville, I highly recommend a romp down Printer's Alley."
Oh, Printer's Alley. How could I have... I love Printer's Alley, and I would have loved meeting Johnny Gow Wow?
Go Wow? Go Wow? I don't know.
Well, any gay band leader, like my friend, right? So we missed that. We've got to go back to Nashville.
All right. What did he had more?
Yeah, he said, but in all seriousness, I did have an insight into your comment this week about millennials playing a lot of games. He said many social interactions are now being structured around games. Trivia...
These are like
games.
Yeah.
Games, not video games. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. Trivia nights at bars, board game nights with friends, rock band, Halo tournaments, etc. And I've always gotten the impression that millennials are scared to have to engage in meaningful conversation and use games as a means of avoiding them. That, and they have a deep appreciation for fantasy, illusion, and nerdy behavior, which itself should give us all pause. It's almost as though people have simply forgotten to hang out.
How to hang out. Just hang around.
Well, what do you think, Gen X? Are you a Gen Xer?
Gen Xer. No, I actually, I think our otherwise wonderful gay band leader maybe he's mad they're not coming and just sitting and listening to music in his band. Because I think I've been fascinated by this trend, and I've seen it in my kids and nephews. And I think it's an escape from the virtual friendships and the social media, that it's true that they don't know how to just sit and hang. So these games give them a way to interact outside of screens. And through the course of games, there is the social
And you have
interaction.
games are fun and intellectually, they can be very intellectually stimulating. Like, have you played Dictionary?
Pictionary or
Dictionary.
No.
So you find the most obscure word in the world.
Oh, we've played that. It was called Balderdash.
Yeah.
There's a board game.
And then
based on
everybody makes up a definition, and then you win if people choose yours.
Choose yours.
Yeah.
But that's we play that in the summer, and it gets incredibly competitive.
It's competitive and dangerous.
But it is like a sort of hearth
fun.
gathering,
Yeah.
It's like a way of getting around a table together in an era when we're otherwise absorbed in
No,
our
I think it's very good. And I think in our last podcast we called the game that we play categories, but it's celebrity, right?
Yeah, celebrity. That's what we play. We're going to be playing it this Thanksgiving, and it's going to be vicious, and you aren't going to be there.
Well, I'll be there for the Christmas edition or the Hanukkah party.
Yeah, we'll do it again. All right. Well, again, we are grateful for our listeners. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. We'll see you in a week.
And Patreon members, stay tuned.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Femsplainers. Keep up with us on Twitter and Facebook at Femsplainers and on Instagram at Femsplainers Podcast. Send questions and comments to contact@femsplainers.com.
A big thanks to Ella Ryder, our research and in-studio production assistant, and to Nat Frum, our audio and video editor. And we're proud to be part of the Ricochet Network and grateful to the American Enterprise Institute for allowing us to record in its studio every week in downtown Washington, D.C.
And miss something? You'll find everything you need at our homepage, femsplainers.com, including links to past episodes, our sponsors, where you can sign up to support us, and even to merch. And please don't forget to like us or give us 5 stars on iTunes.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.